In this video, we will discuss Manage Day Labor Payroll, Manage Day Labor Payroll, Day Labor Payroll Book menu. In this menu, you can create payroll books and have the program to calculate the payroll amounts of your part-timers and day labor employees. In order to create a new payroll book, click New at the bottom and enter and set each field and click Save to finish. The entered year month field is where you need to select the month that the payroll book is related to. And in Payroll Frequency menu, select the payroll frequency of the employees who are subject to the payroll of this payroll book. For example, if you want to pay a certain group of employees whose payroll payment type is every 2 weeks, then select the corresponding payroll frequency. And then, based on the payroll frequency that you set for each part-timer through Earnings Details tab, the employees who correspond to this payroll frequency will be included in this payroll book's scope. And next, in Period field, set the period to the period of payroll payment. For example, in March, if you will pay the payroll 2 times, the first from the 1st to the 15th, and for the second time from 16th to the end of the month, then set the period to the first 2 weeks of March. And then in Payment Date field, set the date to the date when you will actually pay the amount to the employees. For example, the end of the period. And in Period field, you can set it to 2 types. Batch settings will apply the displayed time period to all earnings fields and apply the period to the payroll calculation and apply it when the program pulls confirmed timesheet data. And Item-Specific Settings option will enable Settings button. If you click the button, then you can set the relevant period for each earnings field. So, for example, for a certain earnings field, if you want to limit the period, and for all the other fields, if you want to apply the standard period, then you can vary the period setting for each earnings field and click Apply. So right now, I will create the payroll book for the first 2 weeks of March for the payroll frequency of 2 weeks, and which will be paid on March 16th, and set the payroll book name to March 1st and create the book. Then the row will appear in the screen. And this is just a folder to include the calculated payroll data. And in order to run the calculation, you need to focus first on Preliminary Work column and then New Payroll column. So these 2 buttons will be used to have the program run the calculation. And before running the calculation, you need to set the basic required data through Preliminary Work field. And the reason why Preliminary Work is required is when you register day labor earnings and deductions through the corresponding registration menu, you will set the formula. And the formula will be basically set to pull the earnings amount of register day labor earning employee menu and to multiply the amount by the hours or days that you enter through New Day Labor Work menu. So, in order to have the program multiply the earnings amount of register employee menu by a certain value, you need to pull the work hours and work days entered in the program through Confirm Timesheet function. Click the button and you can input the hours and days for each earnings field in two ways. The first is to manually type in the total hours and total days of each earnings field, like extended hours, late hours, and so forth, for the corresponding period of 2 weeks. You can simply enter the total hours in each field. And the second way is to use Timesheet Type button at the top left. This button will pull the work data that you entered through Day Labor Work Log menu. Select the corresponding earnings fields and apply. Then the hours and days that you enter through Day Labor Work Log menu during the corresponding time period, for example, the first 2 weeks of March, will appear in the input screen, and you can click Save button to apply the data to the calculation, and you can also manually edit the data that the program loaded. And once you've saved confirmed timesheet data, the number of the employees that the program pulled work record for will be marked in square parentheses. And once you have pulled your timesheet data, you can click Calculate All button in New Payroll column to run the calculation for all the employees that correspond to this payroll book. Click it, and the calculated details will be shown in the screen in the form of payroll book. You can verify each earnings and deduction and the total amount for each employee. And the number of hours and days that have been applied for the calculation of this payroll book will be marked on the left side of each amount. So this is the general way of payroll calculation. The program will pull your day labor work logs through confirmed timesheet data and then calculate the corresponding amount by pulling the earnings and deduction amount of Registered Day Labor Employee Earnings Details tab. So the program basically pulls two types of data and then runs the calculation. But what if you want to manually modify only this payroll book's data? Then you can use two ways. The first one is to use payroll book column. So after calculating all, in the payroll book screen, you can individually select each employee that you want to manually apply the editing. You can click on the code and manually edit the amount and click Save to apply the changes. And before saving, if you hover over Save button, you can see Save Recalculate Deduction button. This button is used when you want to modify the amount of deduction fields based on the modified base payroll amount. So if the base payroll amount is modified, then if you set deduction fields to multiply the base amount by a certain percentage, or if you set them to apply the variable amount of earnings fields, then you can use Recalculate Deduction button to affect the deduction amounts based on the changed amount of each earnings field. So I will manually edit the payroll amounts, including deduction amounts. Then you can see the modified amount of Olivia part-timer. And in a similar way, in payroll book column, you can use not View button, but Modify Batch button to select multiple employees and batch apply the manual changes. For example, change all the employees' base payment, or batch apply changes to each earnings field or deduction. So this is the first way to manually change the calculated payroll data. However, if you use payroll book column, you need to note that if you use calculate all or calculate each button to run the calculation again, then the changes that you manually applied will be all reset to the initial calculations, and all editings that you manually entered will be initialized. So in order to prevent that accident, you need to use instead enter amount manually of preliminary work if you want to keep the manual editings after running the calculation through these buttons. And this button is the second way of manually editing the calculated amounts. Click the button and select multiple employees, or you can simply select only the employee that you will change. And click Change button, and then select the earnings field or deduction fields that you will manually change the amount of, excluding memo fields. And then enter the amount of each field. And you can also batch apply a certain amount to all the selected rows at the bottom. For example, modify Olivia's base payment to $600 and save. Then if you click View in the payroll book column, you can see that Olivia's base payment has not been changed. So in order to apply the manual change, you need to run the calculation again by clicking Calculate All button. And then the base payment of Olivia will be modified to the amount that you entered. So if you want to keep the changes after running the calculation, you need to use Enter Amount Manually button. And if you want to simply edit a few amounts, and if you will not ever run the calculation again, then you can use Payroll Book column. And by using the button, you can batch apply changes in a simple way. Use the top field and click Apply on the right, and the amount will be applied to all the rows at the bottom. And run the calculation again, and you will see modified amount in the payroll book. So this is how you can manually and individually create each payroll book. You can use New button first, and then calculate details by using the corresponding buttons. And you can also use ECOUNT Web Uploader button at the bottom, and select the corresponding year month, and download Excel template to batch upload the details and data of each payroll book. So it is useful if you already have existing set of your payroll data. And moving on, we will discuss how to copy a payroll book to another new payroll book. Use Copy button at the bottom, and select the payroll book that you will copy from in From field. For example, copy March payroll book to April payroll book. And if you click Save button, then all data calculated through March 1st payroll book will be copied and pasted to April 1st payroll book. include all fields, and click Apply. And then April's payroll data will appear in the screen. And please note that in order to be able to use Copy button, you need to first create the payroll book folder for To payroll book. So if the folder has not been created, then you will not be able to copy the existing payroll book to the new one. And moving on, we will discuss the actions required after creating and calculating payroll data. If you click View button in Payroll Book column, you can print the payroll details in a book form, and you can print out this report form displayed in the screen as it is. And in the payroll book, the entire payroll data will appear in the screen. And if you want to print the individual employee's payroll statement, use View by Employee button at the bottom. And then select the employees whose payroll statement will be printed out and click Print at the bottom. And then their payroll statements will be printed out. You can use Print button in the same way, or export this statement in PDF or Excel. And you can use Email button to send individual employees' payroll statements through their email address and the email addresses set for each employee through Registered Day Labor Employee menu will be pulled and used for sending the email. And also please note that you can customize the template of payroll book or the template of each employee's payroll statement by using top right option, Template Setup. You can add a new template and then customize the format of each payroll book or payroll statement. And once you have added a new template, you will be able to select the desired template by using the bottom left drop-down box. You can shift between templates. And after completing the calculation of each payroll book, you can use Finalize button in Payroll Book column to finalize this payroll book, which means that users will not be able to edit the calculated payroll book or run the calculation again, or deleting also will not be allowed. So all the buttons related to editing will be disabled like this. And you can also cancel finalization if you want to edit again the payroll book. And use Delete button to delete the payroll book. And also use Details for the works related to individual payroll statements. For example, you can click View button to view each employee's payroll statements. Select a single employee or select multiple employees and click Print button to print out their payroll statements. And here as well, you can use option Template Setup to add a new template, and then use the bottom left select box, drop-down box, to select and shift between templates. And also, in Details column, use Email button to send each employee's payroll statement to each employee through their Registered Day Labor Employee email address info. Verify each email address and set all fields and click Send button then they will receive only their own payroll statements.